Tumbleweed.
Hey guys, I'm Ray.
And I'm Dad.
And today we are visiting petroglyphs.
We're at the Parowan Gap petroglyph site in Parowan, Utah. So we're in the southern part of Utah, and we're going to share with you a look at all the petroglyphs up here across here, and we're also going to share some dinosaur tracks. So
make sure to enjoy.
All right, so we're heading into one of Dad's favorite places. We're in Parowan, Utah, and this is an area known as the Parowan Gap. And in the Parowan Gap, there's two amazing things here. One is there's petroglyphs here that I think are from the Anasazi. We'll take a look at those and we'll double check that. But then there's also a series of gigantic dinosaur tracks here that I'm hoping are still here. It's been many years since I've been this way, but I'm super excited to share this with all of you. The gap that's actually up here, and I'll try to get down the road so you can see, it lines up perfectly with the spring and the autumn equinox, and so the sun will come right through here, which was probably one of the reasons it was the indigenous people did the petroglyphs here. It was a very sacred and special site because the sun would line up right through this gap twice a year. Petroglyphs are carved in the side of the rocks, and these rocks have what's called a desert varnish on them, which is on the sandstone. So the rock that's back here is actually the Navajo sandstone, which is the same sandstone that makes up things like Zion National Park. It's just been really beaten up here because we're actually in between two faults, and this sits up in what they call a horst in geologic terms. And that's what you're seeing here, why it's so shattered and looks so different than things like at Zion. But it creates this desert, you get this desert varnish out here, and then the indigenous people would carve their petroglyphs on them and tell stories based on that, or use them as markers for maybe finding water, or as wayfinders along trails. Here's a bunch of petroglyphs up here, and the petroglyphs, I think they said this area has been lived in and been a sacred site for something like 12,000 years. Basically during the last ice age, people have been coming to this site and using this, and you'll see all the different petroglyphs. So I know the story when I was working out here before in southern Utah was the one that you see the hash marks with the circle going back up and down. Somebody hypothesized that that was actually a calendar that the indigenous people would use to keep track of the seasons. Talking earlier about this kind of ribbon type feature here that's up here on the rock that I was told was a calendar, and sure enough, it looks like that's what they put on here as well, is that they study archaeoastronomy, and this has to do with understanding the timing of the seasons as well as what's going on with the sun. So they have the Paiute perspective and then the Hopi perspective here. And so there's a really kind of neat person in there. I always like the angular type features as well in the petroglyphs. And so this is the old sign. So when I used to come out here, 20 years plus ago, when I was going to school here in Utah, where I did my undergraduate degree, we come down here, and this was the only thing that was here. There was no fence, there was none of this information. So it's really neat to see that the state and the people here have taken the time and energy to try to preserve these and protect them. But originally all they had was this plaque here that was sitting here since the 1960s that we come in. We were able to walk around and get a little closer to the petroglyphs than we are now, but it's a good thing. I'm happy to see they're being protected. So if you're ever coming down I-15 between Salt Lake and St. George, we're just west of the town of Parowan, Utah, and you can come out here and come take a look at these. And this has to be, you know, I always hear about things like newspaper rock and places like that, but the concentration of petroglyphs here is pretty amazing, and they're in such good shape because I don't think a lot of people come out and visit this area, which has actually helped. Unfortunately, we do have people who have put graffiti out here and carved their own names in, which is a real shame that they've done that. But it looks like for the most part, most of these petroglyphs are in good shape, and just the geometries of them are just so beautiful. Tumbleweed. Fun for those of you who don't get to see tumbleweeds very often. They're quite prevalent here, and you have to hike through whole berms and fences basically of tumbleweeds that build up. For all of you who are not used to the West and are used to seeing things like tumbleweeds, here is a tumbleweed, and there's a whole pile of them that got caught up here. So this is your classic tumbleweed, and this is your classic tumbleweed little pileup that happens here when the wind starts blowing and these tumbleweeds come through, which makes it always a pain to get through to things. All right, we've made it to the other side of the gap, and there's still petroglyphs all throughout this section. These look like little bird feet. So there's little bird feet maybe there, and maybe a snake. I don't know. What do you all think some of these petroglyphs represent? Okay, haha. So I was just asking what you thought these represented, and Ray just took me over. There's a sign right here that says what they thought they represented, and they think maybe an eagle with the steps in there, as I said, bird prints, right? There are golden eagles out here. I've seen them a number of times. And then of course they have sheep that are out here too, the bighorn sheep.
This is either bird feet or birds in flight.
Just for scale, you can see this Jeep coming through and looking at this area. You get an idea how big this gap is. So those cliffs are several hundred feet tall on either side. Right, so here's a little bit about the geologic story here, which is really fascinating. So we're standing right here right now, so I'll kind of pan up. There's a fault that runs right through here. You can see it's a little low. So that's a fault that runs right through here and comes right in front of me. And you can't see it because it's basically under the gravel and underneath the soil, but you can see it run through on the other side where you go from kind of the red muddy stuff over to the more competent sandstone. There's a fault runs right through there. If I turn around, it comes right through this little saddle here. So pretty neat. So this is the other side of what we call a horst. And here's an example of that horst. So this is if we're looking at a side view. We're in one side of the graben now. The valley on the other is on the other side that I showed a minute ago. And this horst is this big chunk of geology of Navajo sandstone that's sitting up here in the air. And so you can really see that well in this picture. So we're sitting here and you see how this block has been brought up. So there's a fault that runs right through here, and then there's one that runs on the other side, and you can see how it just is popped up in the air, and it's just flat for miles that way, and then flat for about a mile this way. And then we'll go see some of the dinosaur tracks on this other side. The Parowan Gap is known as a wind gap because the waterway that created it has disappeared. So it used to be a river that came through here. It drained out into an old lake here. It probably had a little lake here or some wetlands here. It drained through here, created that gap as this fault was coming up, or the block was coming up. Pretty neat. So, let's take a look at the petroglyphs in Parowan Gap. As I already said, we're going to go check out the dinosaur tracks next. So I can't tell you how excited I am to see that they've made this into a site to hopefully preserve these tracks. So here's a bit about the dinosaur tracks here. So the dinosaur tracks here are from 65 to 75 million years ago, and they're made by hadrosaurs, or kind of duck-billed dinosaurs, most of them. That being said, there's two other types of tracks here. There's theropod tracks, which have the 3 toes and were meat eaters, things like, you know, a raptor or something like that, not like a T-Rex. Also, there's a ceratopsian track here. I am sad to see, though, this was one of the tracks I worked on back in the day, and you can actually see the dinosaur's metatarsal, this is called, the back part, like a chicken. So dinosaur legs work kind of like chicken legs, where their feet would be forward, and then they have their joints in the back, and you can actually see the knuckles of the dinosaur's toes as well. But it looks like some jerky person broke it off, which breaks my heart. Right, let's go take a look and go see some of these dinosaur tracks. So this makes me so sad. This is one of my favorite dinosaur tracks here. You can see the metatarsal, or the back part of the leg where it's stepped just like chickens, right? And then you can see it's 3 toes, 1, 2, 3. But somebody broke the middle toe. But here's my hand for scale. So you can see how big, and this was a small hadrosaur. Wait till we show you the big ones. More dinosaur tracks, although these ones aren't nearly as in good condition. So here's part of a toe and a toe here. It looks like people vandalized these ones, unfortunately. Here's a toe, here's its middle toe, and here's part of its other toe. So it would have been something like this. So here's its right toe, middle toe, left toe, as the dinosaur stepped in these old muddy deposits here. Also in here, if you pay attention, are things like petrified wood. So here's a little piece of petrified wood. Here's another little piece of petrified wood that's just up from this dinosaur track that fell down into that gap right here. So there's a piece of the dinosaur track. That's its middle toe sticking up there. And so walking around and not just looking at the dinosaur tracks, but looking at the other features in here is pretty cool. Other things you can see in here are these cross beds from where the rivers were flowing through, which is really neat to see. And they're really well preserved, actually. So these are fossil river deposits. One of the other cool things to see here in these rocks are leftover pieces of wood that's been replaced by iron. So they call this formation the Iron Springs Formation, and it gets that name because there's so much iron within these sandstone rocks. And we can see all kinds of features associated with that iron, which gives it kind of this dark reddish brown color in here. And you kind of see the iron rich layers that are in here that are the more yellow to brown layers versus some of the lighter colored layers as you look up. One of the other things that are really neat here are some of the rock formations and how they weather. So this has always been one of my favorite. So you can see how this feature's weathered, and it creates such cool shapes when they weather, and you get these little alcoves and windows into them. We come around on the other side and look, and they create these really basically natural sculptures. The other type of rocks you'll see here, other than the sandstones that you have the dinosaur tracks in here, are these big conglomerates. And so see a number of these here, and this is known as the Grand Castle Formation of conglomerates. So it's pretty neat to see those here. Now those were deposited after the dinosaurs were extinct. So it's a quick geology lesson. So time of the dinosaurs was all in these flat lying beds here, but as soon as you get to the top of where you get the kind of reddish coarser stuff, that was after the time of the dinosaurs. So sometime between when that coarse stuff was deposited and the last of the sandstones on top was laid down was the extinction of the dinosaurs. So pretty neat timeline that runs right through there. Someday I'll have to come out and do a whole geology lesson for you all on different types of geologic structures and a little bit about learning how to read the rock. So as geologists, one of the things that we do is we take a look at a rock and we think about the story of how it got there, what it tells us about what was happening during that time, and what kind of environment it could have been. So we can look at these rocks and start interpreting all of that. These are some of my favorite dinosaur tracks anywhere in the world. And what you have here are two hadrosaurs stepping on each other's tracks. So you have one big hadrosaur here, and it looks like somebody chipped off the toe here, not cool. Hadrosaur here, and a second one stepped here. So I'm gonna get Ray up here for scale so you can see it. And then here's another hadrosaur track. And what's cool is there's actually a little piece of petrified wood that got trapped in there as well. So these are big hadrosaur tracks. So you can see my hand, but let me get Ray up here for scale so you can really see. So now you can kind of see the scale. Can you put your foot up there, Ray? Let's see how your foot compares to the hadrosaur foot.
My hand.
You put your hand there, okay. And there's Ray's hand, but you can see the size of those tracks compared to Ray. So this was a tour of Parowan Gap, which included looking at petroglyphs and dinosaur tracks.
So make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and once you subscribe, press the bell for notifications so you know when we upload a new video. Most of all, enjoy.